Star Wars 7x7 episode 2093 today. I'm restarting a feature on the podcast that we haven't had on here for a couple of years. It's called Star Wars Pop, and I'll explain. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. So, Star Wars Pop, the POP is actually an acronym. It stands for Podcasters on Podcasting. I did exactly 2 episodes of this a couple of years ago, one of them featuring Tim McMahon of Less Than 12 Parsecs and the expanded Fandomverse, one of them featuring Amy Ratcliffe of Lattes with Leia, who's now with Nerdist, and it was a lot of fun, but for some reason I didn't do more of them, and it's time to restart it to get it back going again. So I have already done a number of interviews, and they're going to be coming out in the coming weeks, but I'm kicking things off with a conversation with Dennis and Jay from Podcast Stardust. And before we get to that conversation, I'm just going to ask a small favor. If you haven't done it yet, please give Star Wars 7x7 a rating or review on the podcast app of your choice. I would greatly appreciate that. And it helps the algorithms let more people know about Star Wars 7x7. So that would really be awesome if you could take a moment to do that. All right. Right after a little swoosh will be my conversation with Dennis and Jay from Podcast Stardust. And for the moment, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode. And as always, may the curve be flattening for you wherever in the world you may be. Jay and Dennis, thank you so much for joining me on Star Wars 7x7. How are you both this evening?
Oh, hey, Alan. It's so great to be here. Doing wonderful.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. I've been looking forward to this all day.
So have I. That's wonderful. So just to get things started, why don't you introduce yourselves to the rest of the Star Wars 7x7 audience?
Well, I am Jay Krebs, and I am the co-host of Podcast Stardust with Dennis Keithley, who, of course, is right across the microphone from us, theoretically speaking.
Yeah, no, I'm in Texas, Jay's in Ohio, and we are the hosts of Podcast Stardust, as she said, and we put our show out about 3 times a week, addressing news, reviews, and discussion related to all things Star Wars.
And it is quite good fun, and I was very thrilled to be invited on as a guest recently, and that will be dropping very soon, I gather, as well.
Yeah, that episode will be going out on Wednesday, March 25th.
Aha. So it's actually going to be live it's going to be live already by the time this one goes out. So I'll be sure to make sure that the link to check it out is included in the show notes for this one.
Awesome.
So, how did you two get into Star Wars podcasting?
Wow, that's that goes back a few years, really. When it comes to my personal story of how I got into podcasting, and maybe that's the best way to address it, I was turning 40 a number of years ago, and I had set a goal to lose some weight. I wanted to lose 30 pounds before my 40th birthday. And so I started taking the dog on long walks and, I was listening to music, but I needed something to kind of occupy my attention. So that's when I really discovered podcasts. And the first thing I did is one of my biggest hobbies outside of Star Wars is the NFL draft. So I was preparing for the NFL draft. And so I started listening to podcasts about the players. And then when the draft came and went, I needed something else. So I kind of turned my attention to Star Wars. And next thing you know, I was listening to dozens of Star Wars podcasts. And before long, Jay and I had a common friend, Darth Taxis. He and I got together and launched Starship Sabers and Scoundrels. And right after Rogue One came out, Jay was a guest on our podcast talking about Jyn Erso. And we all hit it off really well. She came back for a summer series on Darth Bane and the trilogy, the books by Drew Karpyshyn. And then shortly thereafter, she became the 3rd host of the show. And then when Starship Sabers and Scoundrels ended just a couple months ago, Jay and I launched Podcast Stardust, and here we are today.
Ta-da! That's a great recap. I would have to add, probably just for myself, It's been a lifelong dream of mine to be in broadcasting and journalism. And I kind of flittered around with that even in college for a while. And then back in the old hyperspace days of the Star Wars fan club, we had some bloggers that would regularly blog, and we all kind of forged a really good friendship. So from there, several of us decided that, we wanted to keep doing this blogging thing. And so one in particular was Dan Zier from Coffee with Kenobi. And so he had established the Coffee with Kenobi podcast network and the series of blogs. So I was a regular blogger there and did a fashion review as well over there. And then I was asked to be on the show several times as a guest on not just the flagship show, but also on Rebels Reactions. And then I'd also done some guest spots on some other shows as well, such as Idiot's Array. And so then again, as Dennis said, I was asked to be a guest on Starship Sabers and Scoundrels. And then, as he said, we hit it off, and the rest, as they say, is history. So here we are today.
Very cool. And so what would you say is your favorite thing about being a Star Wars podcaster?
I'll take this one first, Dennis, if that's okay.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, for me, I think it's just connecting with so many Star Wars fans and people that you get to talk to on the podcast, networking as we're doing, and I never would have gotten the chance to talk to you, Alan, otherwise, perhaps. And just finding a way to connect with just fans around the world. And it's just been really unique for me because I'm also a high school teacher. So it's a cool way to connect with my students. And as soon as they find out that I have a podcast, they just go nuts. And first they can't believe it. And then they say, it's Star Wars? What, do you guys ever run out of things to talk about? And I say, actually, you'd be surprised, but no, we actually don't. So for me, it's just a platform of escape as well as communication, networking, and just to share a lot of great, great things about Star Wars with fellow fans.
Yeah, I think that really nails it. For me, it's appointment Star Wars discussion each week, and I really look forward to it. And so I already have a built-in outlet to talk about the most recent episode of the Clone Wars or Rebels back in the day, or I know that for a number of weeks I'm going to get to talk about the Rise of Skywalker or whatever the current Star Wars topic of the day is. And as Jay was saying, it's given me an opportunity to meet fellow podcasters and have lots of great Star Wars discussion. And this was something that just wasn't as readily available a number of years ago. We had things like bulletin boards and messaging systems like that, but I often found those lacking when it came to creating great Star Wars discussion. And podcasting is just better that you get to hear the inflection of everyone's voices and you get to talk to them, and it challenges you to come up with things, sometimes the things to talk about. You don't necessarily run out of topics, but you have to sometimes find a new way to talk about something, which just leads you to think about Star Wars in a whole new way.
And I love how you said appointment to talk about Star Wars, because it is a weekly therapy thing for us, I feel like. And I know I speak for Dennis as well saying that, because we do really look forward to our recording sessions, and it doesn't matter what kind of day we've had. It doesn't matter how stressful that day was. You can always count on one thing. Star Wars will be there, and Star Wars is therapy. And it's been so great to be able to have Dennis as a co-host, because he pushes me to be a better Star Wars fan too.
That's beautiful. I love it. And you hit on something there too that, speaking as a solo Star Wars podcaster, I don't necessarily get the benefit of on a regular basis, which is the conversations that you have, but that it not only is just two people talking about Star Wars, but it's also drawing each other out and probably challenging each other to some degree, and using the opportunity almost to challenge yourselves in the types of things that you bring to the conversation, I would imagine.
Oh, definitely. And I know I say it all the time when I talk about our podcasting or when we have guests on. It's so great to have someone to bounce ideas off of, because it does help you dive deeper into the topics, and it really makes you question and just contemplate and think between the lines or between the scenes, as the case may be, in different ways. And it's just so much fun.
Yeah. And, Alan, with a show like yours, what I enjoy is that with its daily format, this is one of the things that inspired me to become a Star Wars podcaster, because when I was walking the dog or I was out on a run or whatever, I was hearing these conversations and I was talking back to them, even though there wasn't anybody, there to hear me, even if it was just in my mind. But it does engage that thought process. And there's been podcasts from all corners of the country talking about, and the world for that matter, talking about Star Wars. And I hear what the topic is and it's like, oh, that just sounds crazy. And then you get into it, it's like, well, that was incredibly well thought out. And it is encouraging and inspiring because there just are so many different Star Wars fans out there.
Yeah, there really are. Oh my goodness. And so you talked about inspiration. So what would you say you draw on for inspiration for your podcast?
Wow. Well, we try and get out about 3 shows a week. And again, I think I've told you this before, which absolutely amazes me that you get 7 because that inspiration for topics can be hard to come by. Now, we try and do a weekly news show, and that's pretty easy. You just find out what's going on in the world of Star Wars, whether you go to starwars.com, you go to any of the fine Star Wars websites that are out there. That's pretty easy to do. When things like Clone Wars or Rebels or The Mandalorian are having new episodes that come out, well, we try and do a weekly review. Well, that takes care of itself because there's always, some sort of new Star Wars content. But then we try and do a discussion episode, and that is the most challenging thing, trying to come up with a topic that you haven't necessarily discussed before, or that hasn't been done 1,000 times before, or if it's been done before, trying to come up with a new angle. And a lot of times it is, you'll read a Star Wars comic, you read a Star Wars book, and someone will have said something, and then that gets you thinking about a character that you haven't thought about for a while. Or Jay and I will start texting back and forth, trying to figure out what we're going to cover or what our schedule for recording is, and we'll bounce ideas back and forth, and then just something clicks. And because you might have a great idea, but it's only good for about 5 minutes. And so you need to figure out a way to turn that idea into 25 to 45 minutes of discussion. And that is the challenge, but it really just comes from thinking about it, discussing about it, and just kind of throwing things out there and seeing what sticks.
And Dennis and I feel like we bounce ideas really well off of each other too. So as he said, we're constantly texting each other, and you read my mind, Dennis, too, when you said, oh, it might just be like one line in a novel, and that sparks an entire inspiration for a conversation. Or sometimes it's, our top 10 moments of this, or whatever the case may be. And then, of course, we do our comic book reviews as well. We've been doing The Rise of Kylo Ren, which is actually the first comic book that I've gotten back into in a very long time. So I'm super excited about that. And, of course, our book reviews that we do. We also do a monthly feature called World Between Worlds, where we go through the most current fashion and lifestyle products, and we kind of bring those to light and let everybody know where to find them.
Yeah, and then I guess the only thing I throw on top of that is that, well, 2 things, actually. Before I started podcasting, I was writing weekly reviews for all the Star Wars comics. And that's, in fact, the first time I talked to you, Alan, when I was on the old expanded Comicverse podcast.
Oh, yes.
You and Tim McMahon, and we were talking about the month's comics. And when you write a review for every single comic comes out, you have to dig for some angles and look up every character that shows up, or a reference to some planet that you may or may not have heard before, and then try and find those things. And so that kind of has lended itself to looking in under the rocks for new ideas, so to speak. And I lost my train of thought on the second one. It's just no, I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought on the second idea there, but it is just having some experience trying to look at things in a new way. And sometimes, you've seen something, an old episode of Clone Wars that you haven't watched in years, and then next thing you know, you want to talk about it.
Yeah, you're training yourself, basically. You're reinforcing the neural pathways, if you will, because you have all of this experience in trying to generate ideas, and this goes for you too, Jay. And so because of that, you almost naturally are driven to be trying to spark ideas for yourselves and doing it, and then having each other to bounce them off of as well.
And I'm definitely not one to be shy about reaching out to people either. So we've been blessed by having several guests on our shows, from Vanessa Marshall to James Arnold Taylor, some wonderful Star Wars artists in the past, and we've been very blessed in that way too. And sometimes that's where inspiration comes from too. And I know I drive Dennis crazy sometimes because I'm always like, hey, do you want me to reach out to so and so and see if they'll come on the show? And he has to tamp me down sometimes because my enthusiasm sometimes gets the best of me. I'm almost like a dog, like, oh, squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. Can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And so Dennis definitely keeps me in line, but we've definitely been blessed in that way for sure.
Well, on the flip side of that, though, that encourages me to try and come up with for James Arnold Taylor, for Vanessa Marshall, how do we talk to them and do a discussion that isn't all the questions that they've answered before dozens of times on other podcasts or in other interviews and stuff. And so that is kind of a challenge, and it pushes me. And I do appreciate those things when we get those guests, because, you can talk to them and ask them, how did you get to voice acting? How did you, what did you think about doing this on Obi-Wan? And they've answered those questions, and those answers are available to people in other places. So I always want to try and get them involved in a discussion that might be something new, so we can hear stories and opinions that they may not have necessarily had an opportunity to air elsewhere.
And make it just as unique for them as it is for you and for your audience as well, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So one of the things that you've already shared also is a question I wanted to ask you about, which is where you record your podcast. But I'd like to take a little sideways trip on it too, because you mentioned, Dennis, that you're in Texas and Jay, you're in Ohio. One of the beautiful things about this, new podcasting world that we're in is that it's easier for us to make those remote connections and to be able to co-host a podcast, even though you're not in the same place. It's not like you have to make an appointment for, Star Wars conversation that requires the two of you to be in the same room. Like, have you found that to be, useful, exciting, different, challenging? Like, how has that experience been for you guys?
Oh my gosh, technology is a wonderful thing, let's just say. And the crazy thing is that Dennis and I had actually never met in person until Celebration Chicago last April, and we had been podcasting together for 3 years, Dennis? I think it was almost going on.
Yeah, 2.5 years, something like that. All right.
Yeah. So, I mean, we never would have been afforded the opportunity, otherwise. And so, yeah, it's just, thank goodness for all the technology, because I think the most challenging thing sometimes is just our work schedules and our family schedules. And, we both have families and jobs and lives, and we are in 2 different time zones. So I think sometimes that poses a little issue, but usually not. I mean, we can pretty much work it out and go for it.
Right. Because we can do this online, and we typically record through Uber Conference, because it does the recording online for us, and I don't have to worry about a complicated mixing setup at the home, which I tried, and I found it very difficult to get a great sound out of. There's people that are far more talented than I am at doing that. But at least when we're recording online, we can be flexible with our schedules, as Jay was saying. If something comes up with work, if something comes up with an opportunity for one of the kids, and Jay's boys are a bit older than mine, they can't drive themselves yet. And so, I have to take them wherever it is that they need to go and wherever they need to be someplace. Then we can reschedule on a moment's notice for an hour later, and no one's sitting around waiting on the other one. They can go about their business and do whatever they need to do at home or at work until it's time to jump on the microphone and get down to Star Wars.
Dennis, I cannot wait for your oldest to be able to drive. It's going to blow your mind.
Well, he just got his learner's permit, and so we've done a few lessons, and so far so good. But I am looking forward to that day come later this year when he does get that license.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. And have you like white knuckled it into the dashboard yet?
Not so much. The first day we did it, we just drove around to one of the school parking lots for half an hour, and then the couple other times that we've been out and driving since then, I've just pushed him a little bit harder to get out of his comfort zone, and he's only blown one stop sign. So we're doing all right.
What stop sign, Dad? Come on.
It's like, it doesn't count if I didn't see it.
Well, he was very sorry.
That's good. All right. Bringing it back to podcasting. What other podcasts do you enjoy? And this will be Star Wars ones or not Star Wars ones.
Dennis, you want to take this?
Sure. I listen to a lot of podcasts covering a lot of different topics, and so I couldn't get through all of them because it's literally hours worth of several hours worth of podcasts that I can go through in a day if I'm so inclined. And it just kind of depends on the time of year. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a big NFL draft geek, so right now I'm listening to a lot of football podcasts, which includes Locked On NFL, Locked On NFL Draft, the Draft Dudes, Mel Kiper and Todd McShay's podcast that they do, and Daniel Jeremiah's and Bucky Brooks' Move the Sticks, because I need to know about these players before they have the draft, whatever format that's going to be this year. And then when it comes to other topics, I'm also a big Disney geek. I am very fascinated with the way that Disney works, and so I listen to a number of podcasts that are either about Disney, about their parks, or about trip planning. So that would include WW Radio, Be Our Guest podcast, the DCL podcast, which covers their cruise line, and Disney Deciphered. Those are some of those there. And then when it comes to Star Wars, there's been so many over the years. Of course, I listened to Star Wars 7x7, Coffee with Kenobi, Idiot's Array, our friends over at Kanata's Castle and Brews and Blasters, and I'm afraid I'm leaving somebody out, and it's going to be a slight. But I also appear on Jedi Journals each month, so I make sure I catch out the rest of the coverage that Jay does there, Jay Shepard. And then beyond that, there's kind of a hodgepodge of things that goes from Freakonomics to Hidden Brain, and just whatever's got my attention at the time.
Wow.
I didn't even realize that you listened to so many different podcasts. That's impressive. Most impressive. No, my list is definitely not as extensive as that. But just to echo some of the ones that you've already said, of course, a lot of the ones on our own RetroZap podcast network, such as Kanata's Castle and Brews and Blasters. And Brews and Blasters was kind of the way that I got started with RetroZap in the first place, and kind of bugging Joe, all the time, and Chris about stuff. But, I guess the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? And then Tarkin's Top Shelf is another one that I regularly listen to. You already mentioned Idiot's Array, and of course 7x7 and Coffee with Kenobi. And we used to do the Rebels reactions at one time too through Coffee with Kenobi as well. But of course Rebels is no more. But I'm pretty sure that might still actually be going on. I just haven't listened to it for a while. But yeah, mine is definitely not as extensive a list. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for me. I know, again, I'm probably slighting someone and not thinking off the top of my head, but I think that's pretty much it. No. James Arnold Taylor, Talking to Myself, that one, and his Clone Wars conversations. I loved Clone Wars conversations. So James, if you're listening, bring that one back because I miss it.
And we have another season to talk about too.
Exactly.
And I think I should preface that question in future episodes, and I guess technically now I'm doing it after the fact, by saying nobody take this personally, because you're on the spot, so who knows what you might remember to say or not remember to say. So don't anybody take it personally. Just
Indeed.
Well, yeah, and along with that, there comes a time where I've made so many friends on so many of these other Star Wars podcasts, especially, but every once in a while I want a different take, and so I go out and I search for a new podcast, and that's why the list is so long. I mean, there's a lot of these that I'll take a break from and come back to. And as much as I enjoy football, I can't listen to football podcasts all across the entire year. I actually listen to more football podcasts after the season than I do during the season because, like I said, I'm just oddly fascinated with the draft. But, that's the great thing about podcasting is if you want to know more about something, you can find some podcasts that will cover it. I got into wine, and I was really interested in the different types of wine. So I found a few different wine podcasts that, some of them were very good about breaking it down for the novice, and then some of them were on a very high level. So you can find something that'll match your interest and the level that you want to talk at. And that's what is just the beauty of podcasting to me, is that it's available to everybody and almost anybody can do it.
That's true. And I think too, this is something that I try to tell my high school students that podcasting is definitely a medium that you can reach out to people of like minds. And you don't have to have, as you said, all of this really expensive equipment. I mean, I have a snowball and a pop filter. You know, that's as extensive as my equipment gets. But yet you can really branch out and do something that you're passionate about. And it really does work as a form of therapy. It really does. Oh, and Legends Library. I forgot that one too. See, there I am. Squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. So, but yes. Yes, podcasting is good.
So you've both been at it for quite a while, and you've listened to a variety of podcasts, both Star Wars and not Star Wars. So what, in your opinion, would you say is the secret to a great Star Wars podcast?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I guess I would say there's a couple elements. One, either you need a couple of hosts that got good chemistry and but they don't necessarily know everything the other one's going to say, but they have a good way of talking back and forth. If it is the solo podcaster format, someone who's got enthusiasm, someone who's got some positivity, and then a passion for the topic, whatever it might be. And if you've got those things and there's a little bit of structure that or thought that's put into the show in advance, then it's off to a great start. And it's just kind of requires a little bit of dedication and perseverance after that.
I think those are all great things, Dennis. And the first thing that popped into my head was the passion for the topic, passion for what you're doing, and just a commitment to the people that you're trying to serve through your podcast, you know, and caring about those that are on the other end as if you are having a conversation with that person, even though they're not right there. And just pretending that, oh, you know, you're just having a conversation over coffee or, you know, donuts donuts, those sound good. Or, you know, or whatever the case may be. And the structure, I think, is a big part of that too. And just not, you know, I think part of it for us too is that we try to be non-controversial, I guess you could say, in a way that we're truthful and we're, you know, very upfront, but yet we don't do it for the drama. You know what I mean? And I think that there's some podcasts that are out there that are kind of off-putting because of the way that they approach things, and it's almost more, you know, for the clicks than it is for the actual content. And we just love what we do, and I think that shows in every show that we do try to put out there.
Yeah, I think you hit on something there, Jay, which is just being genuine with your opinions about something.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a time and a place to be a devil's advocate on a certain topic if it will help generate some discussion. But at the end of the day, if you are issuing forth a hot opinion just for the sake of generating frustration and those reclicks, then that's not what I'm interested in. I don't know about it. I can't speak for anybody else, but I appreciate a genuine reaction and a genuine opinion about a topic as opposed to the controversial, inflammatory opinion about a topic.
Amen. And I do think that we hit that on the mark too, because we do have a Discord room on our RetroZap server, and we do interact with our listeners over there as well. And it's really nice because, as you were talking about earlier, Dennis, sometimes I find myself doing the same thing, you know, Alan, whether it's with you and your podcast or other podcasts, I'll find myself nodding along, or, you know, and sometimes you do want to jump in on the conversation. And so the Discord channel has really been a great way for us to interact in that way, in a very genuine way as well.
And listening to the two of you during this conversation, and also even when I was with you guys last week for the Empire Strikes Back episode, the chemistry, I think, between the two of you is also fantastic. I'm sure that's got to be a secret for your success, certainly, if not for other podcasts as well.
Yeah, I think we get along pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we'll get ready to talk about, and knowing Jay and some of her favorite characters and some of her favorite moments of Star Wars, I'll know that this is something she's going to be really excited about. But then there'll be a few times when she pulls out an opinion that absolutely surprises me. And that's always a lot of fun for that to happen. And so, but again, when you've been podcasting with someone for a few years, you kind of get to know their likes and dislikes and what their most favorite things are. And that does kind of help engender great conversation, or at least help you find topics that you know that the other person's going to have a lot to say about.
Mm-hmm.
So, last question for you two. What would you say, it's a two-part question, so cheating there a little bit. What's your biggest Star Wars podcasting achievement so far and your greatest ambition for Podcast Stardust in the future?
Ooh, podcasting achievement. Wow. I just think just being able to connect with people genuinely. I mean, the fact that we're gaining more followers all the time, the fact that we're hitting a chord with people, the fact that they keep coming back and that they tell other people to listen to us as well. I mean, that is the greatest compliment ever, I think, for a podcaster. And I'm sure, Alan, you would agree with that too.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and also having some of those celebrities on, I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's been great talking with Vanessa Marshall and James Arnold Taylor and making those connections. And then, you know, I'm still in touch with Vanessa Marshall. We DM each other every once in a while. So that's pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
And just for James Arnold Taylor to recognize who I was at the last celebration and take a little extra time when he was with my Padawan as well. So yeah. And I think moving forward, just doing the same kinds of things and just enjoying it and just having fun with it, and hope to have some more guests on and just keep at it as long as Dennis will have me. How's that?
I like it.
Well, when it comes to achievements, I get uncomfortable talking about my own success sometimes, and it's something I guess I need to get over. But you know, back at Star Wars Celebration Orlando, I was able to get a press pass because of what I'd done on Starship Sabers and Scoundrels. And so to me, at least that said that someone said, hey, we recognize that you're doing something that is worthwhile. And, you know, and you're going to cover our event, which I did. And I remember every night of Celebration going back to my hotel room and recording, you know, 5 to 10 minutes of whatever happened that day and getting that put out. And then it's been over the years, someone saying, at a con or at Celebration saying, you're that guy from, you know, Starship Savers Scoundrels or Podcast Stardust, aren't you, Dennis, right? And just someone enjoying your work well enough to tell you that is fantastic. And having, you know, people taking a couple minutes out of their own time to do something going off podcast and to leave a review that tells you how much that they enjoy your work and trying and recommending it to others. And it's, you know, we always, of course, ask for those things on the podcast, but when people actually do it, it's just, you know, that they thought your show did something that was worth something to them, to, you know, for them to sacrifice some of their time, because that's the most precious commodity we have is our time. And so when people take the time out of their day to listen to the show and then to recommend it to somebody else, you know, because you're putting your own reputation on the line when you do make that recommendation. And I just appreciate that so much. As far as ambitions go, you know, that's something where you know, trying to get the crystal ball out and look into the future about what I want to do. It's, you know, right now we're doing the 3 shows per week. That is a big time commitment. I'd love to be able to keep up with that. You know, in the past we had 4 a week, and that was a lot of time. I'd like to keep going with this type of a format, and, you know, see this show reach 200, 300, 400, or, you know, good Lord, Alan, how many have you done over the years? How many thousands at this point? That would just be, you know, that would be incredible to me to have something that had that kind of longevity. But as far as ambition goes, I'm always looking for ways to improve my delivery and improve my show. And I just hope to keep finding those things.
Wonderful. Wonderful answers. I love them all. You gave me a perfect segue in the mention of time and the valuable investment. And so I just want to say thank you both so much for taking the time to join me on the show here and to talk about your own passion for Star Wars podcasting and the things that you love about it and what really excites you. So for anyone who is listening, who is excited about what's going on with Podcast Stardust, where can they go to find out more?
Okay, well, you can find all of our shows with the show posts and information over on retrozap.com/Podcast Stardust, or you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. I am at DJKVER2, and Jay is at Joyce Krebs on Twitter. And then we have a Pinterest page. You can find us easily on YouTube. And if you ever have thoughts you just want to get to us, you can email us at podcaststardust@retrozap.com.
I think that sums it up.
And I would like,
I was just going to say, I would like to say too that I'm also part of Star Wars in the Classroom. And so I'm Rogue 7 over there. And so I actually got in, I feel like on the ground floor of that a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And so that's a wonderful organization for teachers who try to bring Star Wars into their classrooms. And I know there's over 1,000 rogues now in the Rogue organization. So I'm very fortunate to be part of that. So yeah, I was Rogue 7. So I was one of the newbies at the onset of all of that. And so that's just a lot of fun. And I do a lot of cosplay as well. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, I am j.krebs. And so I'm always looking for cosplayers to follow. And I do a lot of charity work as well as some events types of things as well. My number one cosplay is Ahsoka. Mm-hmm. And so I do seasons 3 through 7 is my my cosplay outfit. And then I've also done a variety of other things too, from Princess Leia to Padme Amidala, and even some crazy stuff like Darth Maul. So yeah, you never know what I'm going to show up as next.
And I did not know that about you. So that's very cool to learn as well.
All right. Well, yeah, you'll have to check it out. And I'm always looking to improve. And so, yeah, you never know where you're going to find me.
Well, Jay, Dennis, thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it, and I hope that everyone will check out Podcast Stardust as well. Thank you again, and may the Force be with you guys.
Thank you for the opportunity.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.